Hey everybody, welcome back. This is lesson 3 on our Becoming a Percussionist from Scratch series. Today we're going to be covering time signatures. So time signatures was the lesson I was most excited for because I think this is the most important lesson that percussionists have to know in order to go from beginners to the stage that comes after that, whatever that might be for you. So we're going to start off by doing just a quick review, just going over the basics of what a staff is, really quickly, like what's a measure, what's a bar, and then we're going to jump into time signatures. So if you guys haven't seen my other 2 videos in this series, I seriously recommend that you do, because at this point, we're going to be building on top of what we've already learned, all right? So without any further ado, let's just jump into today's lesson, all right? Let's go over to my iPad here. So as you can see here, I've outlined the staff. We learned this in lesson 1, but I want to highlight something very particular. The staff can actually be divided into equal parts, and we call these equal parts bars, or we can also call them measures. So bars and measures are the same word, they have the same meaning, just different words, all right? I'm going to refer to them as bars just because it's shorter. Now, each bar contains the fixed amount of beats, which is what makes them even. So each bar contains the same amount of beats. And if you don't know what a beat is, the kind of technical definition is it's kind of like the musical unit of time, and they repeat at even intervals. Another way to think about it is if you've ever listened to music before and you've ever tapped your foot to a song, that is usually the beat. So the beat is just a regular pulse that plays at a regular interval, and each bar contains a certain amount of beats. Now the next question you might ask is, okay, but how do we know how many beats are in a bar? And the answer is time signatures. Time signatures do other stuff, but one of the main things they do is that they tell you how many beats there are in a bar. Before we jump into what time signatures are, I want to tell you why you should care about learning about time signatures. The first thing, from a percussionist perspective, you cannot read music at all if you do not understand time signatures, okay? And I'll show you very soon why that is. But if you don't have a firm understanding of time signatures, reading music will be next to impossible, all right? Secondly, understanding time signatures allows you to have this incredible ability to have a very adaptable skill of sight reading. So a lot of people, a lot of musicians, non-percussionists included, struggle with sight reading because of rhythm. If you have a very strong understanding of time signatures, sight reading, which is kind of just reading music on the spot, becomes a lot easier. And these are 2 very important skills that become infinitely easier by understanding time signatures. So, knowing that, let's jump into what time signatures actually are. Time signatures can tell us 2 things. Firstly, they tell us how many beats exists within one bar. How many beats there are in one bar. The second thing they tell us is which note, so remember we learned all these different notes and I included this diagram right here, which note is equal to 1 beat. All right, I like to say which note gets the beat, but it's really which note is equal to the beat. Now, on our right here, I just kind of copied out 4 different examples of different time signatures. And as you can see, a time signature looks like 2 numbers stacked on top of each other. So this first one we see here, up here, is 2, 2. So here's the first 2, I'm circling it, 2, 2. All right, that's how we say it. So this time signature is 2, 2. The second one is 2, 4. This one is 4, 4, and this is 3, 2. Right now, that probably doesn't mean anything to you, which is totally fine, which is why I'm here, right? But let's just talk about what these numbers mean, because they mean very, very important things. So over here, I just copied out these numbers as X and Y. So the top number being X, so this number would be X, and this number being Y. X, or the top number, refers to how many beats per bar, how many beats in a bar. Okay, so in this case, right, so in 2, 2, that means there are 2 beats per bar because the top number is 2. So for example, it can be 2, 1, 4, 8, 7, really any number you can think of. Okay, any number you can think of can be on the top. On the bottom number here, this number means what note is equal to 1 beat, Now this is where we have to memorize some stuff, okay? So as you can see here, in 2-2, the top number means how many beats there are in a bar. There are 2. But the bottom number, 2, we might not know what note is 2. Like, what does that really mean? Well, remember, I told you guys that this diagram here, our tree diagram, is going to be the most important diagram a percussionist can use, and I wasn't lying. Whenever we see the bottom number, these bottom numbers correlate to different notes that we already know. For example, up here at the top, we have our whole note. If you ever see a time signature, for example, 2, 1, that means there are 2 beats in a bar, and the whole note is equal to 1 beat. All right? So this 1 means we're talking about whole notes. 2, right here, 2 means we're talking about half notes. So if we had 2, that means there are 2 beats in a bar, and the bottom number means that each half note is worth 1 beat. Similarly, if we ever see the number 4 on the bottom, for example, in 2, 4, that means there are 2 beats in a bar, and the quarter note gets the beat, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have questions about what does getting the beat mean, well, don't worry. I'm going to tell you guys right now using these examples that I have here. So first, let's start with 2-2. What does this mean? We just went over it. So 2 means 2 beats per bar, okay? And this means half note. So the bottom 2 means half note. This means half note, okay? Now, what does it mean that the half note is worth 1 beat? Well, let me show you. So let's start off by writing 2, 2. So our time signature goes at the beginning of the bar. From this top number, we know that we have 2 beats in this bar. So let's just write them up here. So this is beat 1 and this is beat 2. Okay. And we know from the bottom number that each beat is equal to 1 half note. So here we go. Let's just draw in our 2 half notes. So we have 1 half note here and 1 half note here. That means within this bar we can fit 2 half notes. 2-2 means that there are 2 beats in a bar and each half note gets 1 beat. That means we can add no more than 2 half notes to this bar. Okay, let's see if we can make it a bit clearer. What about 2-4? Okay, well in 2-4, just like we had before, we had 2 beats in a bar, 2 beats per bar, but this time the quarter note gets the beat. So our quarter note is equal to 1 beat. What does that look like, you ask? Well, let me show you here. We have 2, 4. Remember, always write our time signatures. Now, we still have 2 beats in a bar. Remember, this means we have 2 beats in a bar. So that's 1 beat, and here's our second beat. Now, this bottom number 4 means, or refers to quarter notes. That means we can fit no more than 2 quarter notes in this bar. Okay? So it would look like this. See here how each quarter note is worth 1 beat. But when we're talking about 2-2, each half note is worth 1 beat. So we can see the pattern that, depending on the time signature, different notes can be valued at different beats, which is why it's so important to know what a time signature means. In 2-2, each half note is worth 1 beat, but in 2-4, each quarter note is worth 1 beat. Interesting, right? All right, let's move on to 4-4. 4-4 is probably the most common time signature. You're probably going to see this most often. All right, and this means that there are 4 beats in one bar. 4 beats per bar. And as we already know here, the 4 refers to quarter note. Here we have our quarter note. Dope. Let's draw in our time signature using our steel blue color here that I like a lot. This is 4, 4. All right, so first things first, let's draw in our beats. We have this time 4 because this top number means 4. That means we have 1, 2, 3, 4 beats in a bar. And using our golden color here, we have 4 meaning quarter notes. So that means we have 4 beats in a bar and each quarter note is worth 1 beat. Let's draw in our 4 quarter notes. That looks something like this. Except I hope whoever's watching this has better artistic abilities than me, but they'll look something like this. So let's compare these last 2 bars. In 2-4, we saw that we had 2 beats in a bar. In 4-4, we have 4 beats in a bar. However, in both of these cases, the time signature dictates that a quarter note is worth 1 beat. Therefore, in 2-4, we can only have 2 quarter notes per bar because there are 2 beats in a bar. But in 4-4, we can have up to 4 quarter notes in a bar because each bar contains 4 beats. Isn't that cool? Now, let's end off this example using 3-2. 3, meaning we have 3 beats in a bar, 3 beats per bar, and 2 going back to our half note. So we're talking about half notes now. Half notes. So let's draw in our time signature as always, right? 3, 2. How many beats do we have here? We have 3 beats in a bar. So 1, 2, 3 beats per bar. And which note value gets the beat? Well, we have a 2 down here, which means our half note is valued at 1 beat. So let's draw in 3 different half notes. That looks something like this. All right. So notice how 3 half notes are in a bar of 3-2. This is the very basics of how time signatures work. The top number means how many beats there are in a bar. This number can be anything. It can be 1, it can be 2, 3, all the way up to an infinite amount of beats in a bar, even though that'd be incredibly frustrating to work with. The bottom number, however, is restricted to the type of notes that we have. So it can be a 1, referring to whole notes. It can be a 2, referring to half notes. It can be a 4, which refers to quarter notes. It could even be an 8, which refers to eighth notes. A 16, which refers to 16th notes. 32, which refers to 32nd notes, and you keep going on, right? So this is the very basics of time signatures. But what if we wanted to get more complicated? Okay, let's say we are in 2-2. We know that there are 2 beats in a bar, right? So we have 2 beats in a bar. First beat, second beat. We also know that the half note is going to get the beat because we have 2 in our bottom number, 2 meaning half note. So here we go, half note, just like that. So the most basic bar could have 2 half notes in a bar. But because this is music, things get a little bit more complicated than having 2 half notes, right? So the rule is, the golden rule, I wrote it in gold so we know, the golden rule is we can sub in notes into a time signature bar of equal value. So I took the liberty of copying out our tree diagram, again, the most important diagram a percussionist can have, and we want to sub in equal notes. Okay, so again, we always have to operate under the constraint of having 2 beats in a bar. That never changes. Okay, and let's say on our first beat, we have a half note, okay? 1 half note is equal to 1 full beat. So this math makes sense. But let's say we want to get a little complicated on the second beat. Well, we can add any equivalent of a half note. So here is our first half note, right? We can sub in any notes that are equal in value to this half note. Here we have 2 quarter notes. 2 quarter notes are equal in value to this half note. That means we can sub in 2 quarter notes in place of this half note. So think of these 2 quarter notes replacing this half note. So let's try that. Let's put in 2 quarter notes. Now this bar is a little more interesting because the last beat is divided into 2 equal parts. So that means each quarter note is worth half of a beat. So we have our first beat right here. So our first beat is just 1 half note, but our second beat is divided into 2 quarter notes. I'm not going to talk about how to play just yet. In the next video, we're going to cover sight reading and how to read music. But now we're just talking about the technicalities, okay? We can sub in 2 quarter notes into this half note. All right, let's try another example. Again, we're always going to have 2 beats to work with here. So in our third bar, maybe we want to start off by having a half note, but maybe we want to sub in 4 eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how these 4 eighth notes are equal to 1 half note. Right? All like that. That's a little messy, but you get my point. We can sub in 4 eighth notes because they're equal in value to 1 half note. And remember, we can do this cool thing where we connect the bridges just like this, so we can connect them together just like that. Now these bars are exactly the same thing. One last bar here. Let's say, again, we only have 2 beats to work with. Let's say we want to start off by having a half note in our first beat. Fine. But this time we want to get a little bit more complicated than we have been. Let's say we want to add in 2 different types of notes. So far we've only been adding in quarter notes or eighth notes. What if I wanted to add quarter notes and eighth notes in the same bar? Well then, I'd have to do it such that the eighth notes and quarter notes add up to a half note. Let's say I want to add in 1 quarter note, just like that. How much room do I have left in the bar? I have 1 beat, right? Half of that beat is going to become a quarter note because, remember, a half note can be split into 2 quarter notes. But 1 quarter note can be then split off into 2 eighth notes. Therefore, we can split this bar even further, right? So we can have 1 quarter note and 2 eighth notes, and these are going to all add up to be a half note. This is the math I was talking about. This is why we have to be very comfortable with this diagram, because things get more complicated and we have to be able to keep up. So we can add 1 quarter note and 2 eighth notes, and it's going to look just like this. This bar all adds up, and we can do the math again. So notice how here in this second bar here, so let's label the bars. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in the second bar here, we have 2 quarter notes, 1 quarter note, 2 quarter notes. That still goes into a half note, so that adds up. In this bar, in bar 3 here, it looks a little bit different. We have 4 eighth notes. 4 eighth notes can be all pushed together to form a half note, so that bar adds up. And then in this one, we have a quarter note and 2 eighth notes. Again, that adds up because 1 quarter note and 2 eighth notes all add up together to make a half note. So, see how this gets more complicated? And also notice how much easier it becomes when we are very familiar with our tree of rhythm, or our tree of notes. So if you have not already watched my second video about the tree of notes, I strongly recommend to do that as we move forward. Next up, we have some practice problems. Question 1. Complete the following measures by adding 1 or more notes. First things first, let's identify our time signature here. So we have 4, 4. 4 meaning beats per bar, right? And then this bottom one meaning quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. That means each bar has to have A, 4 beats, and B, 4 quarter notes, or notes that add up to a quarter note. Let's look at this first bar here. So in this first bar, we have 1 quarter note, so let's call this beat 1, 2 eighth notes. Remember, guys, remember our diagram. Where is it? It's right here. 1 quarter note can be split into 2/8 notes. So that means 2/8 notes have the same value as 1 quarter note. So this collectively is beat 2. Another quarter note being beat 3. That means we're missing our last beat, beat 4. I'm just going to go ahead and add a 4th quarter note, just like that, to complete it. Now, if we do the math, we have 4 quarter notes, 4 beats, everything's good. In the second bar, we need to count how many beats we have. We have a half note. Okay, recall our tree diagram here. 2 quarter notes can be pushed together to form a half note. That means that this half note is worth 2 beats. So this is beats 1 and 2. For the second part of the bar here, for beats 3 and 4, I can either add 2 quarter notes or I can just put in another half note, because remember, 2 quarter notes equal a half note. You can also put in the appropriate amount of 8 notes, but we don't have that much space left, so I'm just going to add in a half note to make things easy. Okay, this one's kind of weird. Here we have 1, 2 quarter notes. That's 2 beats. But then we have just one lone 8th note. Each 8th note is worth half of a quarter note. Just remember a tree diagram. 1 quarter note can be split off into 2 8th notes, just like so. This means that we only have half of a beat here. To make this even, to make this equal to 1 quarter note, we have to add a second 8th note. So there's our second 8th note. So collectively together, these are worth beat 3. Beat 4, we're still missing beat 4. We can just add simply one more quarter note. And now the math adds up. There are 4 beats in this bar. Here, right off the bat, this is beat 1. 1 quarter note is equal to 1 beat. Then we have 1 8th note right here and 2 16th notes. Looking at our diagram, we have 1 8th note and 2 16th notes. That means we can add these together to still form a quarter note. So collectively, this is still worth 1 beat. So this is worth beat 2. This third quarter note is going to be beat 3. And now we have 3 16th notes. We have to ask ourselves, how many 16th notes go into a quarter note? Well, we have a quarter note right here. And then underneath it, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 16th notes. 4 16th notes go into a quarter note. Therefore, to make this even, we have to add one more 16th note. And it's going to look something like this. We can just kind of continue it on like that. And now this collectively is worth beat 4. All right, let's check out this last bar here. 2 8th notes. We already saw over here that 2 8th notes can be combined to form 1 quarter note. So this collectively is worth beat 1. Here we have 4 16th notes. We just saw here in this example, 4 16th notes equal 1 quarter note. So that can be beat 2. This is a quarter note, so this is worth beat 3. And once again, 2 8th notes, as we saw here, are equal to 1 quarter note. So actually this last bar here is already full and we don't need to add anything to it. This is how we have to use our math abilities to fill up these bars. Okay, so that is how we would go around doing a problem like this. Now in the second problem, it wants us to place bar lines where necessary according to the time signature. So we have to look at our time signature. I'm going to do number 2 right here. We have to look at our time signature and determine where the bar lines should go. Now here we have a funky little symbol that looks something like this. It looks kind of like a cent. So in our Canadian currency, we have a cent. I'm going to explain that really briefly. We have this time signature called 4/4, and I mentioned it was the most common time signature. That's very important because 4/4 is sometimes just referred to as common time. And to shorten that, we get C for common. So 4/4 is the same thing as C. So if you wanted to, you could replace this with a C. Now, when we see this is called cut time. Cut time, because we're cutting this C in half. And this is the same thing as 2, 2. Right? Cut time is equal to 2, 2. So when we see this symbol here, it's really 2, 2, which means we have 2 beats per bar, 2 beats per bar, and our half note gets the beat. That means we have 2 half notes per bar. And the math we do from here on out means we have to take that into account. This quarter note is going to be worth half of a half note. And we already saw that this pattern here, 1 eighth note and 2 16th notes, is also worth 1 quarter note. Right? We can use this tree diagram to prove that. 1 eighth note and 2 16th notes is equal to 1 quarter note. Therefore, these two together are going to be equal to a beat, right? Because 2 quarter notes go into a half note, and each half note is worth a beat. And I'm going to draw out that relationship. So we have 2 quarter notes. They go into a half note. So this is going to be worth beat 1. We have 2 eighth notes here. This is worth 1 quarter note because of our tree diagram. You can refer back to it as you need to. And then we have a quarter note here. This quarter note is worth 1 quarter note. Collectively, these equal to our second beat or our second half note. That means we get to place our first bar line right here. All right, hello everyone, this is Editing Ross here, and I just have a quick message for you guys. This next part of the video took really long, and it was just kind of me repeating the same thing I said during the first bar. So I think I'm just going to cut it short here and move on to the conclusion of this lesson. If you would like to see this next part of the video, just leave a comment down below, and I will make a second video going more into depth into this type of question, but I think I covered most of it in that first bar there. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave them below. Otherwise, let's move on to the conclusion. That is quickly how we would do a problem like that, using math, using our tree diagram. I hope you guys had a good time learning this. I know time signatures can be a little confusing when you first learn about them, but they are my absolute favorite to teach. I love them. I think they're so interesting to talk about in theory. But, you know, not everything has to happen in theory. Next is going to be the first time we get to play something, and we're going to learn how to read music. We're going to learn how to read music and read different time signatures, okay? So that's all I have for you guys today, and look forward to our next video because we're going to start playing, all right? I'll see you guys soon.